Welcome back to Skytech-Lens. Good evening tonight. We're talking about Canada, America's famously polite neighbor known for universal healthcare, poutine, and the beaver, which is basically a rat with a PhD in lumberjacking. For decades, the US-Canada relationship was like a cozy old sweater. But lately, that sweater's gotten itchy. A trade war, launched with all the subtlety of a monster truck rally in a library, has frayed this friendship. What started as tariffs to protect American industry has spiraled into a full-blown economic standoff. But instead of apologizing, Canada's pushing back, fiercely, strategically, and frankly long overdue. So grab your poutine, or your freedom fries, and let's dive into how Canada is learning to live without us. Let's start at the border. For generations it was more suggestion than barrier. Canadians came south for cheap gas and wings, Americans went north for scenery and sanity. But now, cross-border travel is plummeting, especially from Canada to the US. Turns out, if you insult a country, call their prime minister weak, and slap tariffs on their industries, their citizens stop spending money at your target. Welcome to the Trump slump. American border towns like Plattsburgh, New York are feeling the pain. Once bustling with Montreal shoppers, now their parking lots are empty. This isn't just Canadians being miffed, it's a conscious movement. Hashtags like #BuyCanadian and #BoycottUSA are everywhere. Canadians are vacationing at home, exploring the Rockies instead of the Grand Canyon, Prince Edward Island instead of Florida, a quiet but firm economic middle finger. The impact is huge. States like Washington, Vermont, and Maine are losing billions in tourism revenue. The goal was to punish Canadian industry, but the first casualties are American small businesses. Is the Canadian government urging people to return? Not at all. They're promoting domestic tourism, turning US policy into a boost for their own economy. The world's longest undefended border is now underused, and the easy flow of people and money has been replaced by suspicion and resentment. Even major US tourist hubs like Las Vegas and Orlando are seeing fewer Canadian visitors. Many are choosing Mexico or Europe instead. The first shot in this trade war wasn't a shot at all. It was the silence of hotel rooms and empty parking lots. In a deeply integrated relationship, you can't punch your partner without expecting them to stop buying you presents. Right now, America's present is a big box of economic pain, delivered to its own doorstep. If the tourism boycott was the quiet start, the tariff escalation was the main event. It began with steel and aluminum, justified as national security. Unless the US feared an invasion by Canadian beer cans, it made no sense. But it didn't stop there. Tariffs hit everything from lumber to dairy, and every time Canadians found a workaround, Washington slammed the door. It became a high-stakes game of whack-a-mole with the entire Canadian economy as the mole. The most cynical move? Targeting products deeply woven into North American supply chains, like auto parts that cross the border multiple times before ending up in a car. Tariffs didn't just hurt Canadian manufacturers, they hurt American factories, workers, and consumers who paid higher prices. The idea that Canada pays the tariffs is a fantasy. American importers pay, and those costs hit US consumers. So, congratulations, Washington. You've punished Canada by making it more expensive for Americans to build houses, buy cars, and drink milk. Some tariffs reached 35%, a knockout blow for many Canadian businesses. The justification kept shifting. National security, unfair subsidies, protecting jobs. But the reality? These tariffs often destroyed American jobs too. When Canadian lumber prices soared, American home builders scaled back, laid off workers, and passed costs to buyers. The US administration deployed trade lawyers to close every loophole, making life hell for Canadian exporters. The result? Constant uncertainty. How do you plan for the future when a tweet can change the rules overnight? But this pain forced Canada to confront a hard truth. Over-reliance on the US was a critical vulnerability. The wake-up call was loud, expensive, and impossible to ignore. With the US suddenly unreliable, Canada finally got serious about trade diversification. For years, over 75% of Canadian exports went to the US. It was easy, convenient, and comfortable. But with tariffs looming, Canada's government launched a global trade offensive. Suddenly, Canadian officials were everywhere: Tokyo, Brussels, Seoul, signing deals and dusting off trade agreements like the CPTPP and CETA. These weren't just acronyms anymore, they were lifelines. Canadian pork producers, once dependent on the US, pivoted to Japan. Seafood found new buyers in Europe, canola oil headed to Mexico and Asia. Even niche manufacturers started finding customers in places they'd never considered. This shift wasn't easy. New markets mean new regulations, languages, and business cultures. But necessity drove innovation. The results are clear. While US trade stagnates, Canadian exports to Europe and Asia are hitting record highs. The US is still Canada's biggest partner, but it's no longer the only game in town. These new trade routes won't vanish, even if US policy changes. Canadian businesses have invested in global relationships. The psychological shift is just as important. The question is no longer how do we sell this in America, but where in the world can we sell this? While the US built economic walls, Canada built bridges. The policy meant to isolate Canada has made it more globally integrated than ever. While the government struck deals abroad, a powerful Buy Canadian movement exploded at home. This wasn't just about buying local jam, it was a full-blown consumer revolution. Grocery stores showcased Canadian products, shoppers checked labels for Made in Canada, and choosing Canadian ketchup became a political act. Social media amplified the movement. Hashtags like #BuyCanadian and #CanadaProud trended, and influencers posted guides to swapping American goods for Canadian ones. The movement spread to big-ticket items and business-to-business deals. Companies sought Canadian suppliers, even at higher costs, to support the domestic economy. Compliance with the new USMCA rules became a priority, especially in the auto sector, strengthening domestic supply chains. Reshoring production created jobs, spurred investment, and reduced vulnerability to US tariffs. The trade war exposed the fragility of long supply chains. By keeping more production at home, Canadian businesses insulated themselves from future shocks. The government leaned in, offering grants and incentives for domestic innovation and manufacturing. The result? A tougher, more self-reliant Canadian economy, rewired by necessity and patriotism. Politically, the US trade actions united Canada's left and right. Everyone agreed, stand firm. The Prime Minister, once all charm, turned tough. Any politician seen as soft on the US paid the price. This unity gave Canada a mandate to retaliate and diversify without fear of domestic backlash. In the US, the reaction was messier. Tariffs played well at rallies, but as the pain spread, cracks appeared. Senators from farming states panicked as Canadian retaliation hit their constituents. Lobbyists flooded Washington with data showing the damage. But the administration insisted trade wars were good and easy to win. Reality proved otherwise. US public opinion split. Some blamed rising prices on tariffs, others saw them as necessary. The issue became another front in the culture wars, with economic reality often lost in the noise. Looming over all this is the USMCA Sunset Review, a clause that lets any country blow up the trade deal every 6 years. For Canada, it's a constant threat. No matter how many new markets they find, their economy is still tied to the US. The goodwill and trust built over decades have eroded. Now, both sides expect tough, tense negotiations, not easy partnership. So, where does this leave us? The US-Canada trade war has fundamentally reshaped one of the world's closest economic relationships. Canada, pushed into a corner, didn't cower. It came out swinging with a strategic, multi-pronged plan. The US policy of aggressive tariffs failed. It didn't bring back jobs, didn't force Canada to fold, and instead hurt American consumers and businesses. For Canada, the pain was transformative. It shattered complacency and forced a national reckoning. Canadian businesses are now more global, supply chains are more robust, and the domestic economy is stronger. The Buy Canadian movement became a statement of national identity and economic sovereignty. But challenges remain. The US political climate is unpredictable, and diversification is a long road. Still, the mindset has shifted. There's no going back. Canada will never again allow itself to be so vulnerable to US whims. This saga is a case study in how smaller nations can push back with smart policy, unity, and consumer activism. In the end, Canada's response wasn't just about tariffs, it was about dignity, sovereignty, and emerging stronger than before. Canada has turned a trade crisis into a catalyst for self-reliance, but uncertainty remains. The fundamental questions raised by this conflict are far from settled. Can the Buy Canadian movement truly replace US products? Will Americans accept higher prices? What will finally make Washington rethink tariffs? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. The old, comfortable highway of US-Canada relations now has new tolls, detours, and speed traps. It's a new era of managed trade and tough negotiation, and that's where we'll downshift for today. Thanks for watching a video, and subscribe the channel now for more updates. Thanks.